Hi, it's Jessie, and I'm here today to talk about the love of my life, Gawyn cont. So before I start, I have a few disclaimers for this video. One, this might be a little erratic and crazy. One, if my partner comes in, he's only on book 5, and this is going to be spoiler-filled, so I gotta stop filming if he shows up. I'm cooking dinner right now, so that might make me stop. I'm drinking wine, so it might be crazy. There's a weird noise happening, so I might just give up. And, I didn't script this. These are my notes for this video, so it'll be a little chaotic. 2, if you didn't notice, spoilers might happen, because I want to talk about his entire character arc. 3, this is going to be a little bit ranty. Again, this is my notes. My post-it note full of bullet points. And this isn't really like trying to fix Gawyn's character, although it kind of is, because I think we'll get into why I want to do this. And then finally, I love Gawyn. Like, you need to know that before you go into this video. I love him unironically. So, that's where I'm coming from, I guess, just so you know. This is surprisingly good considering it was like $5. Alright, so here's the thing. When you do a character art for a character, they have point A where they start, point B where they end up. It might be straight, it might be any way. Now, it's usually not like a straight line. You don't just have, whoop, that's their character growth. Usually it's a little messy. If, for example, in the Wheel of Time, you were going to do Rand's character arc, it might be something like he starts here in Eye of the World, kind of progresses up through Great Hunt, dips down a little, and Dragon Reborn kind of goes up a little bit, and then starts plummeting sometime after book 5. Book 6 goes down drastically. I'm running out of space. And then drastically spikes at the Gathering Storm, and then levels out. You know, that might be Rand's character arc, you know? A character arc can be negative, and Gawyn's arc is undeniably negative, and I love it. I love that we have a character that is objectively a hero in this story. He's not a bad guy. He's not even like Elida levels of trying to do the right thing but ends up doing the bad thing. Like, Gawyn at the end of the day is working for the good guys, but his arc is undeniably negative, and I love that. But here's the issue with Gawyn's arc. Unlike Rand's, which was messy with ups and downs, or any of the other characters in Wheel of Time, where you have even Elida's character arc starts somewhere like here. She already starts pretty low, and she kind of goes up. She has her ups and downs too, right? Gawyn's arc is very objectively, he starts here, doesn't do anything, slowly descends, and then out of nowhere, in Towers of Midnight, he just has a spike up, and then immediately dive bombs. And that's not good. It's inconsistent, it makes his character seem poorly written, and I honestly think this is because either Robert Jordan or Brandon Sanderson, or both of them, had no idea what to do with him, right? Brandon Sanderson had few things. He's like, he needs to be bonded with Egwene, they need to be in love, but then he needs to die. And I don't know how much Robert Jordan gave him for information. I know Gawyn dying was in there, Egwene dying wasn't, but that was... Brandon made the right choice anyway. And so Brandon was left with, I don't know what to do with this. So he gave him a very abrupt turnaround so that Egwene had a reason to love him, marry him, bond him. And then immediately 180'd again so that Gawyn could go after Demandred and die. Right? It's stupid. And I think there's ways you can do it and make that progression feel more natural and have that ending, even that ending exactly the same, work out better. But I'm going to take through some things. I'm going to start kind of book by book, and then I'm going to talk specifically about the ending. Alright, so if we talk about the Tower Coup, this is where people start to dislike Gawyn. This is where Gawyn starts going downhill for most readers. Right? I actually think Gawyn's decision here makes complete sense. If you want my thoughts on that, we can talk about it in the comments, but I honestly think he made the right choice for the information that he had, for the emotional state he was in. I think he did the right thing for him. Here's what I think the mistake is. we don't get to see him make that decision. I think the Tower Coup all around for the show needs to have more. It needs to be more. We get like little bits at the beginning, little bits at the end, but we don't actually see the coup happen. We don't get to see any of the fighting. We don't get to see any of that. And I think we need it. Like, I honestly think it could be Red Wedding level season finale if they wanted it to. Was the Red Wedding even a season? But like that kind of like a twist, like an abrupt change and, oh my god, I didn't see this coming. But I think we need to see more from it to get that. And along with that, I think we need to see Gawyn's confrontation with Hamar. Because was it a case of Hamar came up to Gawyn, sun staring down, and Gawyn was like, ah, and ran him through? Because, like, then I think he deserves some of the hate people give him for this decision. But was it a case of Gawyn picked a side because Elaida had tried Siuan legally? She was legally deposed. He sides with the people legally in the right. And then in the chaos of battle, they just ended up fighting, right? Like, I think we need to see that. We need to see Gawyn make the decision, decide where he sides, and I think we need to see Gawyn and Hamar fight and get more of what happens there. So that's my opinion on the coup. I also think maybe that, like, confrontation between him where he lets Siuan cross the river, I think something needs to be done there. I don't remember exactly how the scene played out, but I know this is one of the things people cite for him being a poor character. It might be kind of nice to have, you know, something a little bit more there, like Min actually reasoning with him and being like, she's already stilled, there's nothing more she can do, or Gawyn seeing, you know, something just a little bit more there. And I think that solves the coup issues, basically, right out. So then we go on to Gawyn at the end of Book 5, during Book 6, where he and Egwene start their tryst. And that's really the best word for it. It's a tryst. It's a fling. It's nothing deep. And you know what? I love it. I absolutely love Egwene and Gawyn's relationship at this point. Here is why. Egwene is 18, maybe 19, might be pushing 20 at this point. She's a kid. Gawyn is a kid. I don't know how old my audience is because YouTube analytics kind of suck. Anyway, so I don't know how old most of you are, but think back to your childhood, high school crushes, even your early college romances. Were you smart when it came to your relationships? I know I wasn't. Okay, sorry, had to go switch over dinner. Where was I? Young adult romances. Yeah, so I was a mess at that age when it came to romance. I mean, if we take that same, like, 17 to 20 age range, let's see, when I was 17, I was a mess. I'm probably gonna cut all of that out because you don't need to know that about me. But, like, 19, 20-year-olds aren't really known for making the best decisions when it came to romance. So I am perfectly okay. Absolutely, completely okay with Egwene looking at Gawyn saying, here's that hot guy that's interested in me, and deciding, hey, let's just make out a bunch. Or if the show's going a little more mature, let's bang a few times. Right? Like, I am fine with that. I don't think their relationship at that point needs to change at all. I don't. It's Egwene's last hurrah in immaturity. She's 20 and she gets so much responsibility thrust onto her. I think it's good for her to have this last little childish fling. I think that's great. Good for her. So then we get to Dumai's Wells. And this is kind of strike two against Gawyn, that he sits there and watches Rand tortured time and time again and does nothing against it. And Gawyn's feelings towards Rand, I don't know, I think maybe do better to establish the fact that that rumor is so prevalent. Maybe you don't have Egwene and Gawyn talk about it, because that's one of the things, is that, like, he doesn't trust Egwene when Egwene tells him Rand didn't do anything. So maybe just cut that kind of conversation out. They weren't doing much talking anyway. So I think that just, and then make that, I mean, that rumor is very prevalent. Lots of other people believe it, so I don't think there's anything wrong with Gawyn believing that rumor, other than the fact that, you know, his girlfriend and his sister tell him not to, which, fair. But Dumai's Wells, one thing that's been suggested, and I don't know who to credit it to, I think it's Emmonsfield Tobacco Company on Nablus' Discord server that originally said this idea, but I don't know, it's just kill Gawyn at Dumai's Wells. Now here's the thing, I love Gawyn. This would literally break my heart. But honestly, it's a good idea. Kill him there. He doesn't really... There's a couple things Gawyn does do later on that are, like, important to happen, but doesn't need... There's no reason it needs to be Gawyn. Egwene still needs to be rescued from the tower. I mean, I guess they could switch that arc around and still make it work. And then he's the one that kind of pushes Galad towards attacking Demandred. So I think there's some stuff there that he does later that are kind of important that you'd have to rework later on. But honestly, there's a lot of pros to killing Gawyn this early. One, you don't have to deal with him getting worse and worse and worse. According to some people, You don't have to deal with where his romance with Egwene goes, which is awful. I will readily admit that it's awful. And you could really do something fascinating here if it's Rand that kills him. One, if it's Rand that kills him, or it's believed that it's Rand that kills him, although I really don't think we need to add any more miscommunication, misunderstandings to this story. If it's Rand that kills him, one, it starts to push that wedge between Egwene and Rand. That is super important later, and I get why there's a wedge between them. Honestly, even when they were in love, they didn't like each other, so I think it's fine as is in the story, but this would add another layer to that. And then imagine Rand's trauma being fueled not just by women that die because of him, but because he killed somebody he looked up to as a friend, somebody that he was reaching out to as someone to help him, and Rand either intentionally or unintentionally kills him. You could have him, like, he was stabbed by the shrapnel that was the box exploding. It could be Rand was fighting soldiers and Gawyn just happened to be there. Or it could be Rand trying to get through, talking to Gawyn, and Gawyn being like, no, I'm gonna fight you anyway, and Rand killing him. It could even be if they had had that conversation before. If Gawyn and Egwene had that conversation before, it could be Gawyn's hesitance to attack Rand because of his promise to Egwene that causes Rand to kill him. There are so many ways you could go with this that would really help up Rand's trauma when it's not a woman. And I am on board with that. So honestly, I don't hate this one. I think it's actually not a bad plan. But let's say we don't. Anyway, basically everything after there, until we get to the little bits at the end, I would keep basically the same. I think maybe give us a little bit more of Gawyn so that we can see that confliction, because here's what I think. I think it makes sense that Gawyn doesn't ditch Elaida even though she keeps doing terrible things, because you know what it would take for him to admit he was wrong? Like, I don't know. Think of doing, like, the worst thing you had ever done ever, right? And the reason you do it is because you're supporting somebody. And then that person starts doing... I'm not going to articulate myself here well. But if Gawyn admits that he's on the wrong side, that he shouldn't be helping Elaida, that he shouldn't be helping the Tower Aes Sedai, the second he admits that, everything he did for her is his fault. He has to take that onto himself. And that includes killing somebody he really looked up to. That's hard. So I think it makes complete sense that he doesn't want to do that. It does. I understand why he stays with her. But I also think we need to see that a little bit more, because that's a lot of me making connections that weren't really in there in the book. But other than that, I would keep things mostly the same. I think we need to get some explanation for why he doesn't go to Andor, besides just that he's staying loyal to Elaida. I think there needs to be some stuff there, but I think for the most part, through that gap, up until the Gathering Storm-ish, can stay the same. Here's where we get to the issues, right? As I explained at the beginning of this, the problem seems to be that Sanderson, Jordan, whoever, needed him to be bonded with Egwene, but still needed him to do stupid things. And so there was that scene where he goes to Elaine, and Elaine's like, you're being an idiot. And he's like, you're right, I am being an idiot. And she's like, yeah, isn't Egwene just asking you to not? He's like, yeah, Egwene's just asking me to not. And she's like, well, what if you just didn't? And he's like, you know what, you're right, I should just not. And so he goes back to Egwene, and he's like, I'm not, I've decided I'm not. And she's like, well, then good, if you're not, then we can be together, right? That's basically it. I don't know if that made any sense, but basically that's what happened. And then as soon as he and Egwene are bonded and married, do they get married off screen between books? Whatever. Then he just starts right back up again. He's right back on his nonsense. And so it didn't make sense. It felt very manufactured. It felt bad. So here's my thing. This is a bit of a choose your own adventure. You have your options. 1, do you still want him to be bonded to Egwene at the end? Yes or no? 2, do you still want him in a relationship with Egwene at the end? And 3, how do you want him to die? I still think he needs to die. It's more of a when you want him to die here, but I still think he needs to die. I think there's really nowhere for his arc to go if he doesn't die, unless they want to, like, give him some cheat. He goes back to be the first prince with Elaine, I guess. I guess he doesn't have to die. Alright, personally, I'm on the yes bond, no relationship, die after Egwene, but still die vote. Alright. I'm going to reorder these. I'm going to start with the relationship because it makes more sense to start with the relationship. So here's the thing. If you want them to be in a relationship at the end, you need to do a lot more work to make that believable. Because Egwene's past the point of just being that childhood relationship. I mean, like, the whole thing when he rescues her in the Gathering Storm, she's pissed at him. And it doesn't make sense for her to just get over that because he actually saves her life once. Like, it doesn't. So you can do a couple things here. You remember that, like, plot arc I did for him that was like, woo? Or that was like, whoop? Yeah, that one. What you could do is have his plot arc be a little more this way, so that when he starts going up again, maybe we actually believe it that time. You don't want too many of these because then it's like, oh, he always fails. But, like, he's, like, slowly getting closer to actually being on a positive growth. And you have him actually starting to seem like he's on the right track. You show more of that questioning. You make him make the right choice a little more often so that when he does that, you're like, well, it's just because he's in love with Egwene and he's really struggling. And then you actually see him give into that to warrant her being in love with him, you know? And you build up the relationship more, like her being in the tower earlier, some things. Other than that, like, you need a little bit more work there, right? I don't really have a good explanation for this one, honestly, because I just don't think it should happen. But the main thing there is you need to show more positive growth there. You can't just have him being on this downward spiral and have this very fake manufactured spike and bomb again. So if you're like me, I'm on the they don't need to be married track. You know why? Because she outgrew him. Egwene grew up a lot through the course of the series, but she grew up very, very rapidly after book 6. Like, there is a big spike of growth there. And so you have Egwene, who has kind of been going up, you know, and she's way up here and he's down here. He hasn't grown, and I'm not even talking about, like, character arc, character growth. I'm talking, like, just levels of maturity. There's a reason so many couples break up when they go to college, because people change in that time period. There's a reason why people after college break up so often, because there's a big change there. And so when you grow up so much like that, it's hard to stay with somebody that hasn't. And that's what's going on with Egwene and Gawyn at the end. Egwene grew up. Gawyn did not. And so it's perfectly reasonable for her to just tell him, like, not just the line she gives him in the book about, I'm the Emerald Sea, you need to listen to me, but, like, actually tells him, look, I don't love you like that anymore. I outgrew you. I think it's beautiful. I think it's really, really good. I think way more media need to portray healthy breakups where couples that are together at the beginning don't end up together at the end, and not in the, like, teen drama way, just in the I grew up and I don't need you anymore. I think that's fine. And I think that's the way it should be. I think I would be very, very happy with that. I think it'd be a great thing to show young women that, like, you know what? If you grow out of a guy, you don't have to stay with him just because you used to like him. Even if she still has feelings for him, you could even show that if you really wanted to focus on it so much. You could show that she still harbors feelings for him, but that he just isn't right for her anymore. And I think that'd be great. Because a couple days later, you can tell because I've changed my shirt. So when we left off, we were talking about Egwene and Gawyn being in a relationship. And for if you want them in a relationship, I basically just said, I don't know, work needs to be done to make it work. And I didn't really have a better answer than that at the time. But I've been thinking, and I probably am going to end up just erasing that clip because it was useless and dumb. But I was in the shower this morning, and I was thinking, and I had the perfect idea. Here's the issue. There is just not enough time between Gawyn rescuing Egwene in the tower and the last battle to reconcile the relationship. There isn't. It's like a month of time maybe. There's no way to fix the trust issues that have happened, the way he defies her leadership, undermines her authority. There's just not enough time to fix all of that. And I know Egwene has the problems too. I'm not trying to absolve Egwene of her responsibility in this in any way, so please don't take it that way. I just see her side of it better. Anyway, there's no way to reconcile a relationship, so how do you solve that? You have them start the relationship sooner. And I'm not saying make it so that their time together and Kyrian wasn't a fling. I still want that to be a fling. I want it, don't change it, just let me have my fun spring break fling. But what if we get them together sooner than the Gathering Storm, right? Then I started thinking about how do we do that? And it came to me, after Dumai's Wells, Gawyn knows Elida's trying to kill him, right? So that gives him a bit of a chink to want to leave her. And then if he hears way sooner than he does that Egwene has been picked as the Amaryllis Seat, wouldn't he want to be with her and leave to be with the rebels way sooner and admit his fault? And then I started thinking logistically about this, and it doesn't really work because if Gawyn's here when he finds out, and Egwene's here, and Gawyn starts riding this way and gets to here, and then Egwene travels to here, and then Gawyn it doesn't really save any time. But then I thought, what else is happening at a very similar time to this? Elaine is trying to take the throne. So instead of it being Egwene and him deciding between the two towers and just being swayed by the fact that he loves Egwene, if he hears that Elaine is trying to take the throne, and so he rides to Andor to be in his proper place, and this is when we talked before about that whole story arc that his arc goes woo woo, right? This could be much earlier, start him on an upward trend where he follows his duty, right? He's sworn to Elaine, and that was a thing he swore long before his allegiance to the tower, long before his allegiance to Elida. So he uses that as his justification to escape Elida, who's trying to kill him. And he gets to Elaine and maybe spends some time with Elaine, but Elaine's look, I got Brigida here, I don't really need you, and by the way, Egwene's, the Amaryllis Seat of the Rebel Tower, and Gareth is there, maybe you should go be with them. And so he does, and she travels for him to get to Egwene. They have the entire time they're together before she's captured to work through all his, issues with authority, plus he has Bryn there as a mentor to try to help him. And so now his arc is this, and it starts to go up. But here's the thing, you can make this still messy. You can still have him dipping down. And here's how you do that. So one, you have the fact that he has to leave Elida. And one of the things holding him back from leaving Elida was the younglings. So you either have him do what he actually did in the book, which is just abandon them, which shows you a little bit of that, maybe not, where he's doing the right thing, but doing it the wrong way. Or you have him take the younglings with him, and I will get back to the younglings and why that would be great. And you still have little bits here and there where, the fact that he chooses Egwene over Elaine, even with Elaine's blessing, will be seen as a decrease, a wrong choice. The fact that he ends up rescuing her, Egwene, when she doesn't really want to be rescued, that would be a thing. So that the fact that he makes the decision in the last battle that he does, if he does, because we'll get to that, won't be seen as out of character. It'll be seen in character if he's just making another mistake again, but we'll still like him and think of him as a good character. Here's the other thing with the younglings that would be just so beautiful if he took them with him, is they stay with Elaine, help Elaine with Andor, because, Gawyn tells them to. Whatever. They're basically abandoned mercenaries at this point, just smaller, right? But better trained than, say, the Band of the Red Hand. But then the last battle comes, and they're given back to Gawyn under the command of Gareth Bryn. So they're part of the Tower Guard, but they're specifically under Gawyn. So Gawyn's leading, but he's still not in charge, which is, I think, the perfect place for him. And that way it kind of brings the younglings to a nice little close, because they kind of were left as a hanging thread at the end, and I didn't really understand what to do with them. And that's where we put them. So if you want them in a relationship, I think that's the key, is you need to get them in a relationship sooner, so that when he rescues her, it's a problem in the relationship, but it's not breaking that relationship from ever happening. And then they can make up better, similar to how Egwene makes up with Swan after that incident, right? Alright, now we'll move on to the bonding, if you want them to bond or not. So, if they're in a relationship and you want them to bond, it's pretty easy. Like, at this point, it's been established in the story that for channelers, bonding is just what you do with the person you love. So I think it's perfectly fine to just have that be what they do. Like, now comes the question of when do they bond, and I think it'd be interesting if they bonded before the White Tower arc, because then that could potentially be part of the reason why he rescues her, is because he actually feels what she's going through. And while it's easy for Swan to be like, I know she's being tortured, but you said not to rescue her, it's much harder for Gawyn, who's like, no, she's being tortured, you know? So I think that would be kind of interesting. Maybe it is a side effect of the Fork Root. She's not able to, like, mask the bond. So I actually think that would be kind of an interesting thing. It would help influence his decisions. We get to see more of why he's doing that. I really don't want them in a relationship, but man, I could really see this being a really good arc, both for him and Egwene and the younglings. Anyway, now if you want them in a relationship and not bonded, first off, leave a comment below if you're in this camp and explain to me maybe why, just because I don't quite understand it. But I think the way to have it is just have a conversation where Egwene doesn't want to bond to anyone because she knows she's a bit, she has a bit of a martyr complex, right? Her entire time she's in the White Towers, her thinking about the fact that she doesn't want it, that she would die if it was the right thing to do, right? That, like, if it would help the Tower and help the light, she would gladly sacrifice her life. There's even stuff before them when she's thinking about the fact that, like, she'll push herself past where she's supposed to go, like, things like that. So she just kind of has a bit of this, I don't want to say suicidal tendencies, but this martyr complex, right? So I think it would be perfectly fine for her, because she is, quite frankly, one of the more self-aware characters in Wheel of Time, to just be like, I don't want to bond you, Gawyn, because, well, I don't want to do that, because she knows what happens to a warder whose Aes Sedai dies, and it would be perfectly reasonable for her to be like, I don't want to do that to somebody. So I guess that's the arc to go in if you don't want them bonded, but again, like, why? Similarly, if you want them not in a relationship and not bonded, it's equally as easy to do as if you want them in a relationship and bonded. It's just, they're not in a relationship, so she doesn't bond him. It's easy. I also think it can be interesting. Anyway, I have feelings on what to do with him. But here's the thing, right? If they're not in a relationship and they're not bonded, Gawyn kind of doesn't have a purpose. So you can either have him stay with Elaine and just join Elaine, but honestly, if you're in this camp of not in a relationship, not bonded, because his arc is entirely dependent upon Egwene, just have him die at Dumai's Wells. Anyway, so, but how do you get them not in a relationship, but bonded? Well, first off, we know Aes Sedai don't have to be in relationships with their warders. Moraine and Lan, Brigida and Elaine, most of them probably, Tomas and Varen, right? So, I mean, like, it's not like an unprecedented thing. But yeah, I can see it be a little bit awkward, you know? Oh man, we used to date. Gross. I don't know if I want you in my head. Honestly, that sounds like a nightmare. But here's the thing. Egwene is so incredibly practical, right? And she even thinks, and I think it's Egwene that does this, although maybe it's one of the Reds, but thinks about the fact that, like, with the benefits that come from the warder bond, both for the Aes Sedai and for the warder, it's selfish for every Aes Sedai to not have a warder, right? And so it could just be that. He rescues her. You could keep that kind of story. He rescues her from the blood knives, and she's like, you know, you're right. It was stupid of me to think that I could do this without somebody to watch my back, and bonds him, just out of sheer practicality. And I love that. I kind of like that. I don't know. One, I think we need more of the main characters to have warders that they're not in relationships with, because, like, just, why? Why does that, like, why is warders equals love? Why does that become a thing? But also, I don't know, it seems really in character for Egwene to be like, this is a really practical thing, I should do it. I also think it makes, like, their story continue, just not without the stupid romantic element that was dumb. I'm sorry, I'm being very biased here. But anyway, that's where I would put it. And yeah, you would have to do a little bit of work for, like, that awkwardness. You could either make the breakup a little more mutual, or you could just have Gawyn be so incredibly desperate for Egwene that he's like, okay, sure, we bond, and then, like, he bonds, and, like, you know how when Rand bonds with the three ladies, he, like, gets that veins of gold, and he's like, oh, they do love me. It could be, like, the opposite of that, where, like, they bond, and he's like, oh, shit, you really don't. Oh, okay. And, you know, that could even be something that pushes him towards making the decisions he does in A Memory of Light, because he's like, in the last battle, because he's like, well, why am I doing this, you know? I think could be some very interesting things there. Now, we get to the last battle, which I did not take notes on because I'm stupid. We get to the last battle. Here's the thing, if Gawyn survives the last battle, I think he needs to die here. I think the only way he doesn't die here is if he's not married to Egwene, not bonded to Egwene, and at this point his arc has just been, like, that his arc ended when he went to Elaine. Like, if for some reason you don't kill him in Dumai's Wells, he decides to go to Elaine and be under Brigida or he and Brigida are co-captain generals, whatever, and then, like, he takes over after Brigida's death. I think maybe you could do that, and that's the only way you could maybe have him not die, but the thing is, like, if he makes it to the last battle, and he's not in any way involved with Egwene, his story is over. So whether you kill him just to, like, one more death to make people sad, or you leave him alive, it doesn't really make a difference at that point. It really doesn't. Then you have, you know, if he's in a relationship with Egwene but not bonded to Egwene, then you have him, I think, just he's in charge of the younglings, and same thing, I mean, Egwene's dying no matter what, right? Like, that's just it. Like, Egwene's dying no matter what. So in some ways, having him live when Egwene dies, if they're in a relationship, would be more tragic. So, you know, it could be he lives, or it could be he dies in, like, just a charge against Demandred, or just a random charge he dies in. And it could be the same thing. He decides to go against Demandred and dies. I just think, here's the thing, and this is terrible to say, but his death, for most people, is sad in relation to Egwene. And so I just I don't know. I think he needs to die. I just don't really have strong feelings if he's not bonded to Egwene, how or when or why he dies. So, you know, do with that what you will. But if they're bonded, it becomes a question of when and how he dies, right? Because it's important, because it'll affect Egwene in different ways. In the books, the way he dies is he gets bored in the last battle because he's just guarding an empty tent, I think, because I think Egwene, like, travels away from it. I don't remember. And he's bored, and he's like, screw it, I'm not doing any good here, and charges after Demandred. I think this could be okay to still do that. Still have him take the blood knife rings. But I think you need to do a little bit of something to establish more than just he's bored. I mean, I think if he's not in a relationship with Egwene and bonded to him, that could be part of his motivation, was that, like, he stops feeling that loyalty towards Egwene after he realizes that there's absolutely no chance, and maybe that pushes him. It could be that, I think, if he's with the younglings, if we've done the work to have the younglings there, it could be that he was ordered to do a charge, and he sees an opening and decides to sneak away. I do kind of like the idea of him still facing off against Demandred in the end, just with slightly different motivations, slightly different impetuses there, but I'm not quite sure how, you know? If you want him to die before Egwene, and that's going to be the important part here. If you want him to die before Egwene, I would do it very similar to how they do it in the book. I would just kind of give him slightly different motivation. Maybe slightly different reasons for doing it, slightly different circumstances under which he gets to him, right? Just tweak it a little bit. Not like a lot, just a little bit. Because again, if we've established that he has this kind of bumpy arc, and yeah, we think he's on an upward swing, but it just makes that death so much more tragic, right? That but, like, he was almost there, but, right? Anyway, but here's my personal opinion. I think he should die after Egwene, because here's the thing, right? I'm going to talk about Egwene's death here for a minute. I have several Wheel of Time related pet peeves. Underestimating land fear, putting queer identities on characters because of stereotypes, whatever. One of them is Gawyn getting credit for Egwene's sacrifice. And I'm wording it that way specifically because that's how it comes across to me, right? When somebody's like,
well, Egwene wouldn't have killed herself if Gawyn hadn't died and she wasn't depressed and sad because of that.
Here's the thing, right? The Aes Sedai bond does not create that, like, death wish suicide thing that the warder bond does for warders. It doesn't do that. It doesn't go that way. Sure, she was a little emotionally compromised, but here's the thing, Egwene would have done that anyway, and I stand by that statement. Egwene was willing to do anything to help the light. She found a way to help the light, and the only way she could have possibly done that was by burning herself out, and maybe she would have lived. Maybe. But I don't think it was possible for her to do what she did without dying, and I think she would have done it anyway, even if Gawyn was still alive. That's why I think they need to swap them. I think they need to swap them. I think Egwene needs to die first so that thinly veiled excuse of taking agency away from the woman is gone. I just think Egwene needs to get credit for that massive, amazing baller move she does, separate from Gawyn. So I think she needs to do it first, and then it's pretty easy if they're bonded. He just goes into suicidal warder rage and decides, well, the guy that she died to kill is gone, so who's the next one? That Forsaken there. And that's why he does it. And then he dies, tragically. There we go. I fixed Gawyn. I feel like this was a really messy video. I know it's going to be messy. I'm going to edit it to make it as coherent as possible. And yeah. I know that a lot of people don't like Gawyn. I know he's not a likable character. I think he's an interesting character. I think he's poorly written in parts. I don't know if I said this in my intro, but I'll say it now. I think Brandon and Jordan didn't know what to do with Gawyn, and so that's why we got this wishy-washy, weird character arc that just didn't make sense, right? And I don't know if everything I've said fixes him. I don't know if any of these arcs are perfect. But I think they're all better and more interesting. Because, like, at the end of the day, I think part of the resentment Gawyn gets is because he's not interesting. And he should be. This slow descent into, I don't want to say madness, because it's not madness. Rand has a descent into madness. Gawyn has a descent into indecision. That's just it. He's indecisive and weirdly erratic, and that needs to be smoothed out in a way that makes sense. And I hope this does that. If anything I said didn't make sense, if you have any questions, let me know below. I would love to keep talking about this. You can find, Ben and I have a Discord server, so you can jump in the Discord server and continue the conversation there with us. You can continue the conversation in the comments below. You can shoot us, at us on Twitter. But I see a lot of Gawyn hate. Some of it he deserves, some of it I think he doesn't. And I think a lot of that is because we don't always get his thoughts, we don't always get his perspective on things. And that's fine. But I also just, see this, attitude that he should just be cut from the show entirely, and I think that's dumb. So, I don't know. Rafe, Amazon, if you're listening, I don't know. Hire me as a Gawyn consultant. Bye.